Hello and welcome! Godzilla and Kong are back for more monster mayhem in Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. Yeah, the X is silent. Who knew? Now, I am going to be doing this review non-spoiler to begin with, and then some spoiler talk at the end. But fear not, I will let you know when, so you don't accidentally find out that Godzilla is Darth Vader's son or anything.
I am your father.
No! Firstly, I would just like to say that I have quite enjoyed this series of Godzilla and Kong movies, also known as the Monsterverse. Well, naturally, you've got to have a verse these days. What are you if you don't have a verse? But before I get started with this film, I'll just give a quick run through of what I thought of the others. Godzilla, the 2014 Gareth Edwards movie. I liked it, but there wasn't enough Godzilla in it. But overall, it was a decent film. Followed up 3 years later by director Jordan Vogt-Roberts' Kong Skull Island, which I personally think is the best movie in this series so far. Unlike in Godzilla, the human characters were actually interesting, and the action was so much better as well. Plus, we got to see a lot of Kong in the movie, which, considering that's what you're actually watching these films for, that's not a bad thing. Then there was Godzilla's sequel, King of the Monsters. This time directed by Michael Dougherty. I thought it was a massive step up. The action was way better, it featured way more Godzilla, and even the human characters, while not Kong Skull Island good, were definitely an improvement. Pulling in actors like Vera Farmiga and Charles Dance, this helped make the scenes between the big monster battles more fun. But mainly it was the epic battles between Godzilla and King Ghidorah that made that film a blast. Then came the Versus movie, Godzilla vs. Kong, directed by Adam Wingard. I loved it when it came out and I love it now. The fights between these two legendary monsters was nothing short of epic. Even if I am to this day still trying to work out how they both managed to stand on that ship. Seriously, it would have sank. They're just too heavy. Logistically, this makes no sense. Really good CGI, good comic relief characters, and a pretty satisfying ending. Although not perfect, it did have its flaws, but I'm sure I'll get around to talking about those in a proper review for the film sometime in the future. But today we have the latest, Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. Once again being directed by Adam Wingard, so it shares a lot of visual and tonal consistencies with Godzilla vs. Kong. Because one thing I will say about the first two Godzilla movies is they felt grittier. They felt more boots on the ground military. Everything was darker and much more serious. Not to say that that choice was bad, but because Wingard's films are more upbeat, brighter and colourful, I personally find them much more fun. Yes, people still die. I mean, Godzilla probably kills thousands of people just by walking through a city. But it's more like video game violence. It's not really focused on too much and they're just doing it to look cool. So you kind of have more fun while watching that. The first two Godzilla movies focused a lot on the importance of Godzilla and what this means for our planet. This new film and Godzilla vs. Kong clearly just wanted to have fun with big monsters fighting each other, and I'm more on board with that. So what I think is a given is that if you liked Godzilla vs. Kong, you will probably like The New Empire because it's essentially more of what that film was. That being said, I strongly advise switch your brain off first. Don't try and make sense of any of this. Which is because it makes no sense, especially towards the end. You've got portals opening up from Hollow Earth to Earth, left, right and centre, and they're having this giant epic battle zipping between the two. It's nuts, but it is fun. Just don't try to understand it, don't overthink it, or even think it. Just try to enjoy it, just go with the flow. Also, I've got to admire the sheer convenience that all of these portals just so happen to open up in massively populated areas, just so the monsters can throw each other into buildings and have a giant epic fight in a big city. But then again, I suppose if one of the portals were to open up in the middle of the Sahara Desert, it wouldn't look as cool. Oh, and for those of you that don't know, Hollow Earth is basically Earth within Earth. filled with monsters and all sorts of other crazy wildlife. This was introduced in the last film, Godzilla vs. Kong, and it's a cool concept. Visually it was nice then, and it still is now. We spend quite a bit of time down there and we see lots of lovely new monster designs, and I especially loved the opening of the film. It opens up in Hollow Earth with lots of these new little monsters that are essentially wolf-like monsters, and there are lots of them trying to hunt Kong down. One large, powerful beast versus a pack of hunters. It was the perfect way to open this movie. Speaking of Kong, I will say that this is definitely more of a Kong film than a Godzilla film. Kong certainly has more screen time, and they treat Godzilla as more of a side character. Don't get me wrong though, Godzilla still has a decent amount of screen time, and a few good fights. He is an unstoppable force of nature in this movie, as he rightfully should be. But Kong is front and centre, and I get why. It's easier to humanise Kong, to have him show emotions and communicate, which is why it feels more natural to build a story around him. Whereas with Godzilla it's not as easy. There's only really two types of movies you can put Godzilla into. You can make a movie with a clear message, like the original Godzilla movie, which was an anti-nuclear bomb movie. Or in a movie like this, which is a monster mashup movie, all you can really do is pit him against other big monsters, which is cool in its own way. But it's easier to write for Kong in terms of storytelling, so I get why it's more of a Kong film than a Godzilla film. Which brings me on to the story itself. It's about Kong being lonely. At the end of Godzilla vs. Kong, he found a new home in Hollow Earth, after Skull Island became uninhabitable. The only problem was, he is a very sociable creature and he doesn't like being alone, so he ventures out further into Hollow Earth in the hopes of finding other surviving members of his kind, which leads to big fights and more exploration of Hollow Earth. Meanwhile, Godzilla's whole story is that he is topside and he is powering up for some looming fight. Now, these titans have a previously stated ability to sense threats, which I would have assumed is why Godzilla was powering up, but when the moment comes, he needs to be told where the fight is. The movie plays it almost like if Godzilla wasn't recruited and brought to this fight, he would never have gone there. Which makes it look like he didn't know about this threat that was growing in Hollow Earth. And because it seemed like Godzilla wasn't aware of what was going on down there, I thought that maybe there was something else going on, that the movie was going to throw in some other monster at the very end that Godzilla was anticipating and preparing for, but no. It was just what was going on in Hollow Earth. Godzilla was just powering up. Maybe he just wanted to be prepared for an eventual fight that may one day come, because in the past few films he's nearly died a lot of times. You know, he's been beaten down into the dirt and then he's managed to get back up somehow and, you know, he's managed to win the fight. So maybe he just wanted to be one step ahead of the game this time. Maybe that's what it was. Either way, the fight was really cool, but I didn't think that Godzilla really needed to power up to deal with this one. Just regular Godzilla would have done the job. But I guess they just wanted to have a pink, purple, glowing Godzilla. And I definitely don't think it's anything to do with the fact that they wanted to sell new toys as well. I also thought that there was a lot of plot convenience in this film. I mentioned earlier that there was these portals that always seem to open up in the coolest places for them to do battle. But there's something else as well. Well, there's lots of something else's, but we'll focus on this something else. Kong hurts his arm real bad. They are trapped down in Hollow Earth with little resources. It looks like Kong is pretty much done for at one point. But of course, they just so happen to have an experimental augmented arm and the exact medicine that Kong needs right there with them. So Kong is back on his feet better than ever almost instantly. Kinda like in Godzilla vs. Kong, when his heart was stopping, and they just so happened to be able to jumpstart his heart with their super duper flying vehicle. To be fair, at least they did prep that in that movie by saying that those vehicles carried enough charge to light up Vegas for a week. But either way, it means that this movie is carrying on that tradition of having the MacGuffin they need to solve the problem. But hey, it's about big CGI monsters roaring and destroying shit, so what more can I ask for? As for that CGI, thought it was pretty good. The monsters were mostly out in the open and in broad daylight, so there was no hiding bad CGI in the night time or in bad weather. Looking at you, Godzilla 2. To be fair, in King of the Monsters it did mostly look decent, it's just some of those CGI effects on King Ghidorah, bit questionable. So, the big bad threat. I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the spoiler section, but for now I will say it was serviceable. Bit weak, but it worked. It got them all fighting at the end, so that was enough really. But it was nothing like seeing Godzilla meet his match with King Ghidorah, or the heavyweight showdown between Godzilla and Kong. It was smaller and perhaps not as epic as Godzilla vs Kong, but it was still cool. As for the humans, we have some characters returning from Godzilla vs Kong. Bernie is back as the comic relief character, and that is his only role in this film. I liked him a lot, but in the Versus film he actually did stuff, he moved the plot forwards. He was more than just the comic relief role. Here, not so much. In fact, none of them do anything meaningful. They are just sort of there. And this is my biggest criticism. They are just not interesting. They can be funny, they can be entertaining, but they are in no way interesting. They are essentially just narrators that tell us what the monsters are doing and give them a hand now and again. That being said, it didn't get in the way of my enjoyment of this film too much. I still had a lot of fun with it, and like I said earlier, if you enjoyed Godzilla vs Kong, you will probably enjoy this one as well. I will give it a 7 out of 10. Enjoyable, but it will definitely blur into the background with all of the other above average action movies of 2024. Spoiler time! So if you don't want spoilers for Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire, get out of here! But hit those like and subscribe buttons before you go. Okay, so the big bad monster. It's essentially another Kong, but one that controls an army of smaller apes and wants to escape to the surface and take over the world. It felt very Planet of the Apes when they first appeared. Actually, given that they live in Hollow Earth, maybe we could call it Under Planet of the Apes. Yeah, okay, that joke sucked. Moving on. I did love that when Kong first finds these apes, he is met with a little Kong. Or perhaps I should say, Diddy Kong. Or perhaps not. Nintendo are always watching. But when he does meet these apes, they try their best to kill him, and he reluctantly has to fight back, but he does eventually manage to pull this little Kong onto his side. Despite this little baby Kong trying to kill him at every turn. My favourite one was when he led Kong to a lake with a giant sea serpent monster in it. That was cool. And I really liked this because despite this younger ape repeatedly trying to kill him, he still just tries to bond with him. And this really helps show us Kong's heart and just how much he didn't want to be alone. Also, can you imagine believing you're the last of your species and then you find other apes that resemble you and they try to kill you? Be a bit of a gut punch. So he was alone and now he's not. Isn't that heartwarming? So this bad monster is called something Scar. Yeah, Scar is the only part of his name that I remembered. Lion King's fault that is. Serviceable villain, but kinda boring. Just an evil Kong really. But that is not all, because something Scar has a pet titan, which I think is called Shimu. Not Shamu, because that's a whale, although that would be an interesting crossover. And this titan is basically a four-legged Godzilla with freeze breath instead of atomic breath. Again, it's a boring design. We have a bad Kong and a kinda bad, but not really bad Godzilla. And I say that because something Scar rules this titan through fear, which doesn't really make sense because this titan has ample opportunities just to freeze the guy and kill him stone dead. So why not? But whatever, they all fight at the end, and like I said before, it did look cool. But as monster designs go, it definitely ranks in the lower half of this monsterverse. Also, remember this person from Godzilla vs Kong? Well, just like Kong, she is also having issues with feeling alone. She grew up on Skull Island and is the last surviving member of her tribe, and is now a fish out of water trying to adapt to a more average life. Well, as it turns out, she is not the last member of her tribe. There are more of them down in Hollow Earth, but not just in any bit of Hollow Earth. There is a previously unknown subterranean part of Hollow Earth, which is funny when you think about it, because Hollow Earth is a previously unknown subterranean part of Earth. Basically a Hollow Earth within a Hollow Earth. cool, I guess, but why? The movie even, at the start, outright says that they have only explored 5% of this Hollow Earth, so why do we need another layer of it? Just make it more of it. It's freaking massive! So yeah, in Hollow Earth, she has more of her tribe, Kong has more family. But this threat is too much for Kong to deal with on his own. He needs help. Sadly though, Kong and Godzilla don't exactly get along, and when Kong tries to recruit him, they fight again. Until MacGuffin time! This tribe has the knowledge to bring Mothra back to life. Yeah, Mothra is in this! Because Mothra is the only ally to Godzilla that can convince him to help Kong. Unfortunately though, this tribe has never been able to bring Mothra back, because that specific, let's call it a ritual, requires a living member of the Skull Island tribe. Which of course they now have with them, so they can do it. Now, I don't understand why a Skull Island tribe member needs to do it. I don't get it. It all just screams plot convenience. But still, it's cool that Mothra is back. Then after the fight is over, the good doctor Eileen Andrews, also returning from Godzilla vs. Kong, is essentially the parent figure here. And throughout the film, she is saying that she doesn't fit into this regular world, and she misses her tribe. Well, Doc Andrews here is ready to say goodbye and let her stay with her people. But no, she doesn't want to stay. She wants to go back with her and give regular life another shot. Well, isn't that all heartwarming and makes you feel fuzzy inside? Also, very pointless, because that entire plot point only existed to bring Mothra back. Again, it's just humans having little character that are just there to make jokes, explain shit and pull stuff out of their arses to help the monsters. It's dumb writing at its finest. But hey, at least we got to see someone perform dentistry on Kong. That was a fun dumb scene. So the movie ends with Godzilla cuddling back up into the Colosseum. Yeah, Godzilla kinda makes that his nest in this film. He cuddles up into it like a cat. And I just love that. And Kong has his new family, so it smiles all round. It was a fun film, and if they made the human characters more interesting and the evil monsters better, it could have been an 8 out of 10, but it was not to be. So 7 out of 10. Still, it's a lot of fun at the very least, and I would recommend it. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.